Hi, Duncan McDonald here with Origins Medicine, and I'm here today to talk about adrenal fatigue. What are the signs and symptoms of it? How do you know if you have it? How do you actually test for adrenal fatigue and find out what's going on? And once we test for it, what do we do about it? How do we actually correct the hormones so that we can bring our body back to proper functioning baseline and restore health and feel better? And also, while we're on the topic, how come my doctor looks at me weird when I bring up the label adrenal fatigue? Should we be using a different term for it? Does it explain what's actually going on? So what are the symptoms of adrenal fatigue? So most of you who are watching this video are probably watching because you've experienced the following symptoms. Adrenal fatigue is fundamentally a condition of overwhelm of our body's stress response, overwhelm of our stress physiology. So we often will feel fatigue and anxiety, so sort of a wired and a buzzy kind of feeling. We'll often have sleep disruption, perhaps waking up between 1 and 3 a.m. totally alert with our mind racing and unable to sleep, and then getting really tired at other times. And then there's an inflammatory component. Often we'll have pain in multiple joints of our body, chronic pain. Perhaps we won't recover from workouts or recover from injuries properly. Inflammatory conditions of the skin are quite common. Eczema, psoriasis, acne, all of these things can happen. Almost any type of inflammatory problem. Digestive issues are quite common. We'll often see sort of chronic digestive problems show up with adrenal fatigue. And these are all explained by sort of the overwhelm of the stress physiology. So what is this physiology that we're talking about? So the adrenal glands are two glands that sit above the kidneys, and they produce the hormone cortisol, which is our primary stress hormone. Most people have heard about cortisol before, but let's just cover it real fast. So cortisol is a glucocorticosteroid. So gluco means glucose. So along with insulin, cortisol helps our body to regulate blood sugar. And then corticosteroid is sort of like cortisone, like what you might have shot in your elbow for pain or maybe use topically on your skin. It's the primary way that our body manages inflammation. And at the same time that it helps manage inflammation, cortisol also is our main hormone of alertness. So we naturally have a surge of cortisol that happens in the morning. That's actually kind of what wakes us up and gets us going for the day. And then there's a tapered drop off that happens till at night. It's about 1/10 what it was in the morning. This signals the body along with a rise in melatonin that it's time to go to sleep. And voila, that's what creates our circadian rhythm. So we need not only the proper amount of cortisol, but we need it to be released at the proper time. Otherwise we can feel pretty miserable. And so it's sort of a Goldilocks hormone. We don't want it to be too high or too low. And the symptoms that can be created, the picture of symptoms can look very similar with high cortisol or low cortisol. I've kind of given up trying to figure out just by talking to a patient what their test result might look like. So now it's time for us to talk about, okay, so if we have this understanding that it's based on our cortisol release, how come it's only the natural medicine community that uses this term adrenal fatigue? Should we be using a different label? And my answer to that is yes. So the problem is not that your adrenals are so fatigued that they can't produce cortisol, they're just withered up and no longer able to do anything. The problem is actually that your brain is no longer signaling the adrenal glands properly. You know, we have ancient biology. And for millions of years, life was probably pretty boring, punctuated by moments of stress that we would either survive and cortisol would surge to help us, or we would not survive and the problem would be solved. So either way, though, we weren't designed for the kind of chronic stress that we see now. And by stress, I don't mean just emotional stress, like, you know, a fight with your spouse or significant other, or, you know, stress from the job. But actually what I'm talking about is the allostatic stress load, which means the entire sum of stresses that are affecting the body. And this can include things such as toxic stressors like pollution, or dietary stressors such as inflammatory and processed food. It can be undiagnosed infections that we're not aware of. All of it can be improper sleep or improper exercise. All of these things will affect cortisol release and our stress response overall. So we're only usually aware of a small amount of the things that are stressing us at any given time. And so if that stress system becomes overwhelmed from all these different stressors, it causes the brain to constantly be signaling for cortisol release, and the adrenals kind of stop listening properly. So the whole signaling to the adrenal glands becomes muted and improper. And this will lead to either like a hypo production of cortisol, or a hyperproduction, or it'll cause rhythm disruptions. And so really the proper term that we should be using is adrenal dysregulation, a dysregulation of the signaling from the brain to the adrenal glands, or sometimes it's referred to as HPA dysregulation. You'll see that a lot in the literature. But I think it's really important that all of us in the medical community are on the same page with how we're talking and labeling this, because it is a real condition. And if you're watching this video, you're probably feeling really crummy, and you don't want to be dismissed by other medical practitioners who think you're just making this up. So if it is a real condition, then we should be able to test for it, right? How do we know actually that you have this condition, and how do we know to what degree, and therefore how do we create a proper treatment plan? So the first step is to do a salivary or urine-based cortisol test. And this is always done with multiple samples during the day. This is one of the reasons why we don't use blood, because just doing multiple blood tests in a day would be pretty stressful. So, but our body doesn't squirt out all of its cortisol right at one time, right? So we need to have multiple samples so we can see that proper rhythm of the cortisol production and the output. We usually, in our clinic here at Origins Medicine, we typically use what's called a BioHealth 201 adrenal stress profile, and it's 4 little vials. It's an at-home kit that you take home. You just fill these 4 little vials with saliva at certain intervals during the day, then it wraps up with a UPS label. You ship it off to the lab. When the results are done, they're emailed to us here at Origins Medicine. And sometimes we'll use another urinary test called a Dutch test too, which I'll save for another video, but that can show us sort of an expanded hormone profile. Once we have those results back, we can see what's happening specifically with you. And based on that, we can give supplements that help the body to produce more cortisol or to lower cortisol. And also supplements that can sort of raise or lower and correct that rhythm, so you're not feeling buzzy and wired at the wrong time of the day and completely dragging yourself through the rest of your day and having unexplained fatigue. Now, what we use are functional protocols. So what we're looking to do is actually to signal the brain again by creating sort of what should be the regular rhythm and output, to signal the brain so it recognizes this and kind of reboots the system. The brain will recognize the proper circulating amounts, and then it'll restore proper function to the stress response. Our goal is not to take control of the system or somehow try to suppress it or seize control. Our whole purpose here at Origins Medicine, with both functional medicine and Chinese medicine, is to restore proper function. So these are not protocols that you have to be on forever. You don't take these supplements for the rest of your life. There is a sort of beginning and end, which is based upon your lab, and at the end of it, normal function should be restored. So, on a final note, I just kind of want to say that, stress is not a bad thing. We kind of vilify stress, but stress is actually what makes us grow and become stronger. But it only does that in the presence of a proper functioning stress response. If our stress response is working poorly, then every little thing in our life can be overwhelming. And, we lack the ability to engage our family properly, our work properly. We're kind of ruled by fatigue and insomnia and inflammation and brain fog, and we really live a subpar life. And I can tell you that in every chronic health condition, there is a hormonal component, and this chronic stress sort of dysregulation of the adrenal function sits at the apex of our health. If it's not corrected, it's really hard to get anything else in the body to stably improve. And this is why at Origins Medicine we use an adrenal stress profile, and we correct the adrenal stress response of every single patient that comes in the door. Because if we don't do that, it's really hard to get people to sort of get to the point with their health that they're looking for. So if you want to know more, please feel free to click on the link below here and contact us directly. And we can talk to you and figure out what the next steps are to get you back to the place where you need to be. Okay, thanks for watching this video. Thanks for listening to me. and I look forward to talking to you in future videos. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.